that maple tree gives off a chemical called a pheromone that goes out through the rest of the forest and unites with the leaves and the trees and the rest of the forest. Those trees pick up that pheromone, and then they produce a chemical to withstand the insect infection. That's important for those trees to be able to do that. It's important for them to be able to communicate with each other by using chemicals. It's important for us to do the same thing. What we smell on each other is important. What we see on each other is important. Those things are controlled by DNA. Can you teach your child to love? Can you teach your child to hate? Sure you can. But you can do it because those chemicals are there. We are an animal that has the ability to make our environment part of so we can survive. We can control our environment. We can control it because we've got intelligence. We can control it because we have emotions. We get those things. We get the basic cards we play with from DNA. Some of us get a better deck than the rest. What are you going to do about that? And the answer is, you can't do anything about it. You can try to fit into your environment. You can't make yourself something that you want to be just by wishing it. You were a sperm and an egg, and that sperm and an egg developed from a lot of cells. I want to ask you a question because. Another question, because I hear this a lot. People are saying, well, how do you know about that evolution? You weren't there. How do you know that those things are really happening? You weren't there. Well, my question to you is, were you there when you were conceived? Do you remember then? Can you prove that you were conceived if you weren't there? Well, some of you are saying, well, that's a silly question. Well, of course it's a silly question. And it's a silly question because we can look back in the past. We can trace back what happens to animals to make them behave a certain way. We can trace back to certain animals to show what kind of characteristics they have. If you were to take a little chunk of skin right there from me and look at that hair follicle, then you were to take a bird and take his wing and take that little follicle out right there. That's a feather follicle. Of course, if you took it from his leg, it would be a scale follicle. If you took a little chunk from a fish, you'd get another scale follicle. So there's scale follicles, feather follicles, and hair follicles. When we look at the DNA in those follicles, they're almost exactly alike. And then when we look at the DNA that produces the proteins that makes hair, scales, and feathers, it's almost exactly like. We can show relationships. That's important. Evolution wouldn't mean anything if we couldn't show relationships. If we found that a dog was more genetically related to a frog than it is to a cat, we'd know something's wrong. But we never find that. We know we've got so much information genetically that we may never figure it all out. We spent a lot of time here talking about fossils. Fossils don't mean anything as far as evolution is concerned. We don't need them. We got all the evidence we need to prove evolution without fossils. Forget fossils. They just aren't important. What's important is DNA. Please.
All right. The question was, what's the purpose of life? Okay. Joseph Stalin executed 14,700 Polish officers, prisoners of war, at the Katyn forest. Why did he do that? How would he execute prisoners of war? Adolf Hitler executed at least 6 million Jews, plus millions of others. Why would a person kill Jews? Well, Hitler thought they were an inferior species. They hadn't evolved as far. He was actually trying to speed up the evolution process. 1975 to 79, the Khmer Rouge, under the leadership of Pol Pot, executed more than one-third of their entire population. Check out the killing fields. Why did they do that? Why were the Australian Aborigines treated like they were animals? Why were Australian Aboriginal skulls dug up out of graves, or people were executed and their skulls were boiled down and they're sold to museums in America to have displays for evolution because they have a bigger jaw than other humans do? Kip Kip Kinkle said, if there was a God, he wouldn't let me feel the way I do. There is no God, only hate. Well, on May 21st, 1998, 15-year-old Kip Kinkle, a student at Thurston High School in Oregon, entered the cafeteria, fired more than 50 rounds from a semi-automatic rifle. 26 students were injured, 2 were killed. Later, the bodies of his parents were found in his home. He was arrested, taken to a police headquarters where he attempted to murder a detective. He said, if there was a God, he wouldn't let me feel the way I do. So there's no God, only hate. Why have violent crimes increased nearly 1,000% since I was a boy? And that's the time evolution became a popular theory in our textbook. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris made a video prior to the Columbine shootings. They were talking about a football player. They said, he doesn't deserve the jaw evolution gave him. Look for his jaw. It won't be on his body. Klebold's father was a geologist who believed in evolution. Both Eric and Dylan were followers of Nazi teachings. The shooting took place on Hitler's birthday on purpose. It was planned to commemorate Hitler. Eric's T-shirt said, natural selection. They killed Cassie and Rachel just because they were Christians. They killed Isaiah just because he was black. Hitler hated black people. After all, they hadn't evolved as far. That was Hitler's thinking. The clothes may give a clue to the thinking of these teenagers. It said natural selection. Yes. What about this natural selection? Well, natural selection selects. It doesn't create a thing. It selects. That's all it can do. It's not a creation process. We go into that some other time. So my answer to the question is there a purpose to life? Absolutely, there certainly is. God created this universe with a plan. He created man with a purpose. Now, I have found in my speaking on this topic about 800 times a year all over the world and 15 years worth now, the reason people accept the evolution theory is not because they have a scientific reason. I asked a kid 2 weeks ago, I was debating 2 professors, or I forget where I was, it doesn't matter, 3 weeks ago. One kid came afterwards and said, evolution's a fact. I said, well, calm down, let me ask you a question. If creation was true, if the creation story is true, would that affect your lifestyle any? If there was a creator that said, thou shalt not commit adultery, no pornography, no lying, no cheating, no stealing, would that affect your lifestyle any? He said, you're trying to embarrass me, aren't you? I said, I don't even know who you are. I'm just asking you a question. The reason people accept evolution is because of their sin, not their science.
Dr. Hovind, this question is going to you first. You've mentioned the second law of thermodynamics to prove that God must have provided the initial energy or the initial something in the universe. Have you considered that some of the laws of nature only work in certain situations? For example, Newtonian physics breaks down towards the speed of light. So does the second law of thermodynamics really prove that God created the universe?
There are several ways to define the second law of thermodynamics. There's all kinds. Let me try to get. Well, it'll take me a minute, but basically, they all boil down to the same thing. Matter, everything tends toward disorder. Okay, things don't order. That doesn't prove God created the universe, and it certainly doesn't prove the biblical view. Okay, and it doesn't prove everybody ought to become an independent, temperamental, fundamental, right-wing, radical, chicken-eating Baptist like me. However, if you keep studying, you will get there. Okay. I think the second law of thermodynamics demonstrates there must have been a beginning. Since everything is winding down, everything is falling apart, there had to be a beginning. There had to be something that wound it up. So yes, I think the second law of thermodynamics is proof positive that there was a beginning. Even the evolutionists will admit that. Oh yeah, 20 billion years ago. Well, what was before that? Was there any time or space before there was matter? And where did this matter come from? They have a totally illogical theory. Yes, I think that it's logical to say in the beginning God instead of in the beginning, nothing, or in the beginning dirt, or in the beginning matter, They worship matter like the Christian worships God. There's no difference. They're both religious. I think ours is more logical and scientifically defensible, but they're both ultimately, in the final analysis, are simply religious theories. So the second law of thermodynamics, which is, as far as anybody knows, universally believed, as far as Newton's law is breaking down as you approach the speed of light, there's a lot of theories about that. There's also theories, there's an article in Discover magazine last year, April of 2003, that says Einstein was simply wrong, folks. Okay, there's a large article in there. The speed of light is not a constant. So I don't think it's correct to say that we know for sure that these laws break down as we approach the speed of light. It may be true. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows would be my point. I cover quite a bit about the speed of light and evidences of it in the last 10 years, proofs actually, scientific experiments that say the speed of light is not a constant. I'll get you some of those here. If I can get... Oh, no. Sorry about that. See, I told you about asking the questions in the right order, didn't I? Remember that? Be a lot faster. The The second law of thermodynamics says everything's falling apart. There's lots of stars out there.